Lieutenant Andy Block with the Radnor Police Department, and on behalf of our Township Manager, Mr. Robert Zinkowski, and our Chief of Police Superintendent, William Collarwillow, I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening and thank you for coming for this very important police forum on active shooters. At this time, I'd ask everybody to stand so we can cite the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, I'd like everybody to remain standing. If we could have a moment of silence for all the victims that have been involved in active shooting incidents throughout the United States and the world, and most recently and sadly within the last 24 hours in Turkey, as well as 2 weeks ago in Orlando, Florida. Thank you. Please be seated. At this time, I'll turn the microphone over to Superintendent Collarwillow for a few opening remarks, and then I'll come back and give you our agenda for this evening.
Thank you, Andy. I'd like to welcome everyone, and on behalf of the Township Manager that allows us to give these types of presentations from time to time, I'd like to thank Mr. Zinkowski. We've given other presentations on school violence, predators, internet safety, and this is the most recent because of the national trend, and people have a lot of questions about what happened in Orlando, and there were a lot of questions about why the police responded the way they did, why they waited, and we'll try to answer as many of those questions as possible. You'll see what I had here, and I spoke to members of the media because a resident was good enough a couple of weeks ago to show me something that was inserted in the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Sunday Inquirer. And this really outrages me. There's a company that is selling bulletproof school bags and three-ring binders for you to buy your children. And it says, don't risk your children's lives anymore. So they're making parents feel compelled and guilty that if you buy a school bag that's bulletproof, it's going to protect your kid. That is bull, excuse my language. All right? Now this is a bulletproof vest made of Kevlar, which is the substance that stops bullets. Doesn't stop all bullets. And this weighs about 15 pounds, and this goes on a person my size. Now you imagine a 7 or 8-year-old kid that has a school bag made out of Kevlar, first of all, and they're in school like Sandy Hook, and the shooting occurs. Now Lieutenant Block's going to explain something that you're going to experience tonight that's going to be very shocking. So we're going to prepare you, and I'll let Andy speak in more detail of that. But once that occurs, do you think the child is going to have enough sense to say, let me go get my school bag so it protects me? If you go on this website, it even tells you when children are running from the scene, they're to hold the bag up to their head to prevent any headshots. Shootings that happen that Lieutenant Block and Sergeant Dietrich are going to speak about are close range, like what happened in Orlando, like what happened in Sandy Hook. The objective of any of these terrorists, whether they're homegrown or they're from another country, they want to kill and cause as much upheaval as possible, and that's their goal. And another thing, like I told the reporters, even if you wear a bulletproof vest and you get shot in a bulletproof vest, you will die from blunt force trauma if the round is powerful enough. So I don't want anybody to fall into these traps thinking you're going to be safe, your children are going to be safe because you bought them a bulletproof school bag. It's ridiculous. So thank you for your time, and I'll turn it over to Lieutenant Block.
Thank you, Superintendent Collarwillow. So this evening we want to start our program, and the first thing that I'd like to do is, I'll go old-fashioned, is to basically put up a warning here. This evening's presentation will contain a simulated active shooter exercise sometime during the evening. And with that being said, the exercise will be loud. It may be startling to some people that are in the room. So there's two things that I want to bring to everybody's attention. One, is anyone currently armed in the room? Again, I'm going to ask, is anybody currently armed? It's not a problem. We just need to be aware of it for personnel safety and officer safety. The second thing is, if there's anybody in here that would not want to participate in this exercise, please let us know now. We will make the appropriate adjustments for it. Is there anybody in here that would not want to sit through some type of simulated situation that we're going to put on for this evening? Everybody's good with it? All right, excellent. So moving forward, what we're going to do tonight and a couple of objectives. And with our introductions is, first what we're going to do is we're going to give you some information and presentation on what the active shooter is, who the active shooter is, the characteristics of those active shooters, and basically what's most important is the prevention, all right, and what to do if you're involved in a situation, if an active shooting event were to occur where you're attending some type of an event, whether it be in a public domain, a private residence, wherever it might be. So with those objectives, basically our goals are to change your mindset. That's the most important thing tonight, is to change your mindset and have you look at things in a dynamic manner. When you came in here this evening, how many people were looking around to see where the emergency exits were, that if something happened, where are my escape routes? Many people may not be thinking that way, but I guarantee you by the end of this evening, you will have that mindset. That's what we want you to leave with. And essentially, that is having a plan. And how do you obtain or adopt a plan? It's through pre-planning, and that pre-planning starts this evening through the instructors that will be giving this seminar, which will be myself, Sergeant Dietrich, Lieutenant Flanagan, and several of the other firearms instructors. So with that being said, I'm going to ask Sergeant Dietrich to step up to the podium. All right, we've gone over our introductions and what our expectations are throughout the evening. We anticipate that this seminar should last about an hour and 15 minutes, and we would ask everybody to hold their questions until the end, and we'll have a question and answer session throughout the evening as long as it takes. So the first thing we want to talk about is what would you do in a situation, all right, if you were involved in an active shooter event, if you were attending a concert, as you saw, or at a music hall, something the other night down in Orlando. What would you do? How would you react to something like that? How do people react to it?
We got the door unlocked! Jones, where you at? Where's he at? He ain't gonna raise my taxes! Somebody better start talking! Don't hide him! Where's he at? Come on! Somebody better start talking! Where's he at? I don't know where he is right now! Tell me! Somebody better start talking! The secretary told me he was here right before I shot her! Somebody start talking! Somebody's gonna go down, I'm telling you! Somebody better start talking to me! Tell me where he is now! Stop hiding him! Where's he at? Where is he at? I want to know! Who knows where he is, huh? You know where he is? Where's he at? Start talking! Come on! Tell me now! Oh, look at this! Drop the gun! No! Drop the gun! No! Bang!
You see why the lieutenant warned you? I bet your heart is still pumping even though you know it was coming, right? Now imagine a real life situation.
All right, at this point, what you've seen was an active shooter situation that went down. The officers responded based on the calls that were being made to 911. Once they responded, they came in and they neutralized the active shooter at this point. They still treat him as a suspect. They take him into custody. He's handcuffed, and then he subsequently removed. If he needs medical attention, EMS is called, the emergency medical services, and he's transported to the closest medical facility or a trauma center. So the actors that you saw here this evening are all Radnor Township police officers. They're instructors. The active shooter was Detective Jamie Metzler. Well done. And our responding officers, who are both SWAT officers, is Highway Patrol Officer Alex Janoski, who's in uniform, and then our SWAT officer, Brett Greaves, who was in his SWAT outfit.
And that is exactly how they would dress when they go into an active shooter situation. Last week, Lieutenant Block, Lieutenant Flanagan, and a couple of our SWAT officers responded to Fulcroft when that officer got shot. So what you see is realistic.
So this is part of the simulated exercises we're having throughout the evening, and we're going to talk about what just occurred. Now, I'm going to turn the podium over to Sergeant Dietrich now, who's going to give you the basic aspects of what an active shooter is.
Good evening. I knew it was coming and my heart still jumped, so. Okay. First, we're going to define what an active shooter or active killer is, and then we're going to talk about what motivates them. So we say active shooter a lot, but active killer is more apt. because it usually is firearms, but it can be other weapons as well. The United States Department of Homeland Security defines an active shooter or an active killer situation as an individual actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined space or populated area. Again, as I just said, most often it's with firearms, but we do see edged weapon attacks, especially in other places around the world, but we have seen them in the United States. Most often, people targets with our so-called soft targets. And soft targets, or where killers can find little impediment to pressing their attacks. They have little security or no security measures to protect the public. We're going to go into a detailed list of what some of those are, but we all know from the attacks we've seen around the country, schools, malls, places of commerce, places where we just don't have any, they're not hardened at all, and they're target rich, meaning there's a lot of people there that are not protected. Causation. We're now going to go into what are the reasons or motives of active shooters, and they vary widely. And that's what makes it very difficult to try to put a profile together of what causes somebody to do this. We're going to visit each one of these individually: mental health, vengeance, bullying, self-radicalization, and other factors. Mental health. The Sandy Hook is an example. The Sandy Hook shooting, which is where 27, mostly children, were killed up in Connecticut. The shooter never was formally diagnosed, but his family believed he suffered from schizophrenia. Mental illness is a common factor amongst many active shooters. It's a functional role in causing the massacre is indeterminate, however, meaning that they think it's a contributing factor, but oftentimes there's other factors that go along with the mental illness. And a lot of times it's also not diagnosed. One of the issues with mental health is under federal law, it prohibits the sale of firearms to individuals, certain individuals with a history of mental illness. However, state law doesn't always follow that, and moreover, the computers don't always talk to each other. So they might be on the state computer, NCIC, if you know what that is not letting the federal computers know that there's a problem. And it's a problem because they could have a mental health issue in one state, go to another state and be able to secure a firearm. And it's I hate to call it a loophole, but it definitely is a point of weakness for them to be able to secure firearms. Vengeance, perceived slights. This is a photo from the 2016 UCLA shooting in Los Angeles. Shooter believed his professor stole computer code. He also, by a lot of accounts, suffered from mental illness. So those two things combined, he went looking for the professor and ended up doing what he did out there. Victim of bullying. This is mostly applicable to school shooting situations such as Columbine. Often the perpetrators of school shootings experience bullying and harassment that was long-standing and severe. And bullying is often a factor in the decision to mount an attack on a school, especially by students. I should note that it's obviously not everybody that's bullied turns around and does something like that, but bullying is a serious problem. Myself and Lieutenant Block have given a bullying presentation on several occasions to the school district. It is something we take seriously, something the school district takes seriously, and this is one of the reasons why we do, because it can lead to something very dramatic, very drastic, if it's not addressed. Self-radicalization, the homegrown terrorist. San Bernardino, Orlando shooting, both those are homegrown terrorists, meaning they're American-born. They weren't directed by anybody else. Nobody was controlling them. They got online. They became self-radicalized through reading and became more and more militant in their beliefs. This can be religious. This can be white supremacy, as we're going to see in a second. There's a lot of ways that they can become self-radicalized. But it's difficult because law enforcement doesn't, if you're online, you're just getting angry and it's going to lead you to go shoot something up. It's hard for us to see that. We don't see that until they actually show up. These are the two San Bernardino shooters. They were inspired, as the FBI pointed out, they were inspired by former foreign terrorist organizations, again, had no direct contact with them. And just like the Orlando shooting, there was no indication that the couple was directed by a terrorist group or was part of a broader terrorist cell or network. Continuing self-radicalization, as I said, sometimes it can be white supremacy sites that get people angry. And that's what the Charlestown shooting situation was. He became infatuated with the Trayvon Martin shooting, which is down in Florida. And he got online and he started reading more and more provocative and militant materials. And this led him to want to start, as he said when he was arrested and they interrogated him, this made him want to start a race war, which is why he went into that church and killed those 9 people that are up there. And there's a variety of other factors that contribute to active shooting situations or active killing situations as well. Just to list a few: loss of significant relationships. How many times have we seen the media, or see on the media where they go into a place of work where the ex-girlfriend, ex-wife is, shoots the wife, ends up taking other people hostage or kills them. Loss of a job. Post office shootings. How many factories have we seen on the news where they go in, they shoot the boss, co-workers, what have you? Changes in living arrangements, major adverse changes in life circumstances. All can be various factors. An unknown FBI study looked at active shooting situations between 2002 2012, and 40% of them, they were not able to find a clear motivation for it, not even mental illness. So again, all this makes it really difficult to figure out what the causation factors are behind it and to help prevent that, help for law enforcement find these people before they do their shooting. Terrorism. FBI, I want to actually read the definition because a lot of times there's a debate over whether an act was terrorism or not. FBI has a very specific definition that they use: violent act or an act dangerous to human life in violation of criminal laws with the intent to intimidate or coerce the government, civilian population, or any segment thereof in furtherance of a political or social objectives. More often than not, what they define as terrorism is anything that's directed or controlled from oftentimes outside the country or a larger group. But it can also be what the Charlestown shooting was. He was trying to start a race war. He was definitely trying to execute an agenda, a political or social agenda. Terrorism, true terrorism, active shooters that we can point to and know that they were directed and coordinated attacks. Some examples are the Paris attacks of 2015, where 137 people were killed, 368 people were injured, and they had 9 different shooters in that situation. 7 of them were killed. Charlie Hebdo was the magazine in Paris that published some offensive Muslim photos or diagrams. 12 people were killed, 11 injured, and 2 shooters. And of course, we had last night the Istanbul airport attack. Unknown number shot. They actually started out as an active shooting situation. Then they detonated their vest. But they actually, outside the security area, and that picture down to the right is one taken from the airport last night. They started shooting everything up and then blew themselves up. I'm going to turn it back over to Lieutenant Block.
Thank you, Sergeant Dietrich. What we'd like to do over the next few minutes is I want to go over and outline the active shooter versus the hostage situations, and there are 2 distinct differences with respect to both situations. As we know, the active shooter is a suspect who is actively or immediately causing serious bodily injury or death when they enter a room. As we saw earlier in our simulation tonight, Detective Metzler, who was portraying the actor as an active shooter, he comes in the room. The activity is not contained, and therefore there's an immediate risk of death or serious bodily injury to the potential victims, which in the simulated situation is you in the room here. So that is the overview of the active shooter. Now, the police response to the active shooter, it has to be immediate and it has to be effective. So what you see, as soon as the officers arrive, and it's an active shooting situation, the first officer there is gearing up. They're entering the building, they're going in, and they're looking for the actor, the person that's shooting. They're following the shots. It requires them to actually step over victims. All right, basically every time they hear the firearm discharged, essentially somebody is being shot and potentially killed. So their objective is clear, is to get in, find the shooter, and neutralize him, as you saw this evening. With that, as additional officers arrive, they will enter the building. What you see here in the photo is a 4-diamond or a 4-officer formation where they come in. If 4 officers are there, they'll gear up in the building, they'll meet up, they'll do a rally, and then they will continue to move towards that. But officers are not going to be waiting on the outside of the building, all right, if there's somebody inside the building shooting. We talk about a barricaded suspect. This is a suspect who essentially comes into a room, they're not shooting, all right, they're in a stationary position and they start threatening people, but shots are not being fired. It's usually barricaded in a room or a building, they're armed, and they've displayed some violence prior to coming in there. But again, The difference here is there's not an active shooter situation going on. They may or may not be holding hostages. If they are, it becomes a hostage situation where we have our response teams activated, our SWAT teams, they respond as well. There's no indication the subject is actively immediately causing death or serious bodily injury. So the officers go based on the information they get at the time of the call, the additional information they're getting through the 911 centers, and that's why it's important everybody contact 911. And when they arrive at the scene, all right, to basically see what the situation is. It's situational and what's going on. Is there active shooting going on or not? They'll make that decision at that point. When we talk about the barricaded suspect and the police department response. All right, a traditional deployment, and this was the traditional deployment up into 1999, prior to the Columbine shooting incident. The officers, with a tactical concept, maintain a secure perimeter around the building until the SWAT team or the crisis team arrives. They have negotiators that will start to engage the person that is holding people hostage or is barricaded in the room or the building. And obviously their whole objective here is to have a successful resolution without anybody being seriously injured and or killed. That's what happens when it's a barricaded or a hostage situation. And we want to focus on the Orlando Pulse nightclub shooting and the timeline. There's some times here that are very important for when it occurred. This originally started at 2:02 a.m., 2 o'clock in the morning. All right, there was a 911 phone call, and there was an extra duty police officer that was working in the area of the club as a result of activities. They received received the call that multiple shots were fired at the club. Additional officers were dispatched, and they arrived on scene at 2:04. At 2:08, there were other law enforcement agencies that came and they made entrance into the nightclub itself, and that's where they engaged the shooter. At that point, the SWAT team had been called out, and that's a protocol, but as you see, it was initially an active shooter incident. Those officers entered the club, they went in, and they started to engage the shooter. What happens next is he then barricades himself in the bathroom with other people. So the people that were killed, the 49 people that were shot, it occurred prior to the officers getting in and engaging him inside the club at that point. He goes into the bathroom, and now we have what's known as the barricaded subject with the hostages in the bathroom. So they're holding their position. The SWAT officers arrive there, the negotiators arrive there, and obviously at 5:02, they make a breach into the room itself, and they take out, at 5:14, they take out the shooter itself. So they're very, very technical situations on how the police department responds. And here in Radnor, as you saw earlier this evening, we are equipped for both. And we have the immediate officer's response. If it's an active shooter, they're gearing up, they're coming in, all right, and they're neutralizing the shooter. And in addition to that, we have officers that are on our regional SWAT team. So the SWAT teams are also being notified immediately. And not just one, there'll be usually 3 teams notified to respond to where the incident is itself in those situations. The other reports that they were receiving, that law enforcement was receiving in Orlando, is that the shooter may have had an IED, an improvised explosive device, on his person as well. So that's another situation that you try to establish some type of rapport through the negotiations to determine if he or she does have that, okay, and how to try to mitigate that. Simply because if they're in a room and there's another 50 people in there with that device on there, with a plunger or some type of detonator, that individual has the ability to take everybody out with one click on that plunger or the activation device. Some common characteristics of the active shooter situations that we want everybody to be aware of this evening. Targets. Nearly all of these incidents occur on soft targets, or at soft targets. And what is a soft target? A soft target, all right, is a target-rich environment where it may be a large gathering place. And according to the FBI's reports in 2014, 45% occurred in areas of commerce, including businesses open to pedestrian traffic, businesses closed to pedestrian traffic, malls, and obviously the Orlando Pulse nightclub, where there were 49 killed, 53 were shot. Another soft target in the area is, we have it right here in Radnor Township, is Villanova University. They have a stadium and a pavilion, all right, where there's approximately 13,000 people can fill the stadium, and there's about another 6,500 that can fill the pavilion when it's at its maximum occupancy. So they are also considered soft targets simply because the active shooter and the ideology here is to get into a place that houses or will accommodate large crowds and to create massive destruction in a matter of minutes. That is their whole goal when they go into the active shooter mode. All right? We talk about the educational environments. 24% of them occurred. And again, this is according to the FBI statistics in 2014. We have the Virginia Tech killing, in which 32 were killed and 23 were injured. 10% of them occurred on government properties, primarily, as we're well aware of, at military installations and bases. Fort Hood was the most notable back in 2009, where 13 people were killed and 30 were wounded. There was 9% in open spaces, such as Christopher Dorner, an LAPD officer who shot 8, killing 5 people in 2013. 4% occur in residences, 3% in houses of worship, such as Charleston, South Carolina, where 9 were killed, and 2% occur in healthcare facilities. Most notably, in 2014, we had the Fitzgerald Mercy shooting down there, where 3 were shot and 1 was killed. And in that situation, it's a county incident. Officers from Radnor Township responded to that, as well as our tactical officers. So it's close to home here. How do they generally end when we have these types of incidents? Sadly, 46% of the active shooter incidents are ended by the application of force by police and security, which is a good thing. However, 40% end in the shooter's suicide, 14% of the time the shooter surrenders, and 1% the attacker flees. Most importantly, in most of these incidents, okay, are over within 10 minutes or less. The average time from the time the shooting starts till the time the shooting ends is approximately 4 minutes and 32 seconds. So if the person comes in and they have multiple weapons, which they normally do, and that is part of their profile, within 4 minutes, many people can be seriously injured and or killed. So the response by the police department is extremely important. That they're trained, which we are here in Radnor. Our average response time is 2 minutes to any site within the township, which is a good thing. So the officers are trained to get in and mitigate right away. We focus a little bit on the shooter and what the shooter's about. The suspect's behavior is often most likely unpredictable. We don't know who they are. We talked about earlier about the lone wolf, and the ideologies that people have, and we're going to drill down on that in a few minutes. The suspects usually do not have an escape plan. They have one plan, and that's come in and create mass destruction in a large gathering area. And multiple weapons are usually involved when this occurs, as we've seen time and time again in the aftermath and the subsequent investigations. Common characteristics of active shooters that we want you to be aware of. 96% of the shooters are males. 96% of the attacks involve shooters acting alone. The loner, usually quiet with defiant outbursts and emotionally unstable. The FBI has done analysis on this, and they've found that active shooters were often described as social isolates who harbored feelings of hate and anger and had some contact with mental health professionals over the years. They have a history of violence. Usually it's domestic related, elevated frustration levels, erratic behavior that is experienced possibly in a domestic environment, pathological blamer or complainer. It's always somebody else's problem, or somebody else caused this and now I have to deal with it. They have strained working relationships, they have extremist views, and they display threatening behavior from time to time. So if you know somebody like this, or somebody tells you, or a friend of a friend tells you that they know somebody that exhibits this type of behavior, that's something for a general concern. That's something that we want to follow up on. It's not a problem to call your local law enforcement to say, hey, we're concerned about this person or that person, and that's something we can look into and do some background investigation on them and talk to them to see really where their mind is, their mindset. We talk about the lone wolf attacks, and this is primarily what we see right now in present day situations. Lone wolves present challenges for current law enforcement agencies and prosecutorial approaches to combating terrorism, because these individuals are radicalized without significant contact with others, and they operate alone. As I just went over some of the other issues we see with these individuals, law enforcement generally does not know about this or not aware of it until we get a phone call, or sadly when the incident is occurring, or the aftermath of it. So the lone wolf always presents an issue for local law enforcement as well as federal law enforcement and throughout the world. There are some differences between what we see here in the United States as what we see overseas with respect to the lone wolf and terrorism. But the lone wolf attacks are basically defined as the deliberate creation or exploitation of fear through violence or threat of violence committed by a single actor, a single person who pursues political change linked to a formulated ideology, whether it's of his own or that of a larger organization, and who does not receive orders, direction, or material support from outside sources. We see after the fact, and I'll use Orlando as an example, where there was an allegiance to ISIS that was discovered as a result of the investigation, the post-shooting investigation. That was what that individual, and I don't name these people. I'm not giving them notoriety for what they did. I'm going to talk about who they are, but I'm not going to name them and give them any publicity on it. But in that situation, there were writings in there that that individual had pledged allegiance to ISIS and had adopted some of their ideologies. ISIS didn't know this individual, but for them it's a win. So the next thing you hear that they're taking responsibility for the event down in Orlando at Pulse, all right, simply because they look at it, that person had their ideology, and why not take it? We're over here, we're across the seas, we're overseas right now, but it's a win for us, and it's another situation here where we're showing you what domestic terrorism is all about, where it reaches far and wide. The trends that we see in our domestic lone wolf attacks here in the United States. Increasingly, lately we see targeted law enforcement and military personnel that are involved in it, doing it. And also, if you remember the Eric Frein situation up in northeastern Pennsylvania, where he assassinated one Pennsylvania state trooper and seriously injured another one. Basically, it was an assassination attempt on two troopers where he was successful on one and not on the other. Again, it was a lone wolf situation that nobody was aware of it, but he had a background. Overwhelmingly, they use firearms, all right, when they conduct these attacks, compared to the lone wolves over in the Western countries, who basically rely on a hijacking situation and the bombings, as we saw at the airport of Turkey yesterday. Those people come in, they have some type of IED that is strapped to their body that they're wearing. They'll come into the area where there's a large amount of people, and they'll detonate that. And they increasingly become radicalized via the internet. It's very easy to log on, we all know that, to find out what the trends are, how to build a bomb at home, how to get other items brought to your house that you can assemble different types of IEDs. It can happen within a matter of days. That's tracked. It's tracked through Tripwire. It's a program that's set up here in the United States. But the more information we get on that, the quicker we can respond and try to alleviate a situation from happening. There's also extremist media and the civilian workplace. These are other areas we want people to be aware of. We're doing some thought-provoking here for you this evening. They also proclaim an individual ideology instead of claiming affinity to specific organized extremist groups. Lately, we've been seeing, though, a lot of these individuals, these lone wolves, pledging, again, the allegiance to ISIS because that's on the forefront right now. They're hard to identify. In this situation here, it's hard to develop a profile of the typical lone wolf subject. We find out, or the suspect afterwards, we usually find out after the fact. Some have advanced degrees, UCLA shooters in San Bernardino. They have a variety of social and economic backgrounds, variety of races, ethnic and religious backgrounds, and religious motivated terrorism accounts for 43% of the lone wolf attacks in the United States. So there is some correlation there. And the individual shown here was responsible for the Colorado Springs Planned Parenthood shooting. Again, it was out of a left field situation, but it was a lone wolf situation. So the common radicalization and mobilization and the path that these lone wolf individuals follow is it often starts with a personal, social, or political grievance that creates a receptive point. They typically experience a crisis event that exacerbates these grievances and leads them to adopt that radical ideology. And this is basically setting them off. It's setting their path up. After the ideology resonates, they go through anger projection. There's some moral outrage, simultaneously escalating with the irritation by the initial grievance. And as the cycle of anger continues, the terrorist eventually reaches a trigger point where there's a flash and they determine it's time to take action on their behalf and on theirs. So we want to talk about recognizing signs of political workplace violence. It could be a current or former employee, alert human resources and management of employees that exhibits any type of potentially violent or unsettling behavior. So I'm going to turn this over to Lieutenant Flanagan now, who's going to walk through what you can do on the prevention side of the incident, and this is just as important as giving you the background with respect to what the lone wolf is and the profiles that are associated with that.
Good evening, everybody. I want to thank you for taking the time to come, because this part here is where although all these building blocks are educating you, getting you ready, we're going to go into some things that you can actually help potentially stop one of these incidents from happening. And you're going to see the slide again, see something, say something, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Observation skills of workers, families, and coworkers are critical. As we saw some of the lone wolf attacks in the previous presentation, those people showed some particular signs that maybe that group that I just mentioned would have picked up on. And often they're doing two major points, and that's pathway and fixation. And I don't want to get caught up in memorizing different terms and things that are put out, but what we're talking about is people who do some of the active shooter incidents, whatever their reasons are for, are often doing a lot of research, planning, or preparation for a terrorist attack or vengeance on a family member. It could be as simple as domestic violence. And friends and coworkers and family people may be aware of that or come across this evidence. Fixation on a particular topic, preoccupation with a person or cause. There is an accompanying deterioration in relationships or occupational performance that others may notice. And I think everybody in this room, myself included, has a story of a family member or somebody going through a tough time where we can pay attention to those indicators and possibly see something and then say something to help prevent it. These individuals often, before their violent behavior occurs, develop a warrior mentality. And they start to associate with weapons, previous attackers or assassins, people that you would not expect them to be associating with, and maybe people who have done mass harm before and are known for that, and it's a sudden change in behavior. That would be a see something, say something situation. Leakage: when planning to harm a target through an attack, persons often communicate such intent to a third party via postings, social media manifestos that they may put. And that leads us right into a direct threat where you would come across some type of communication. And that communication, sometimes these people even warn law enforcement or some type of official agency. We and law enforcement, Radnor Police and law enforcement across this country, when we get to this level, we consider it a direct fact. And it is a significant issue that you must report to 911 immediately, not hesitate, not do something. You come across something in writing, an email, a text, a posting, or something, you need to immediately notify some type of public safety agency that this is going on, because we have to take these things seriously. And if you see something, say something. This is a national campaign where we're going out and we're telling people that you are going to see these trigger signs. Now that you have education, I guarantee you this group will be more perceptive to a potential incident that may occur. We're going to go into the Department of Homeland Security Run, Hide, Fight video. This video is an excellent video. We're going to get into it.
It may feel like just another day at the office, but occasionally, life feels more like an action movie than reality. The authorities are working hard to protect you and to protect our public spaces. Sometimes bad people do bad things. Their motivations are different. The warning signs may vary, but the devastating effects are the same. And unfortunately, you need to be prepared for the worst. If you were ever to find yourself in the middle of an active shooter event, your survival may depend on whether or not you have a plan. The plan doesn't have to be complicated. There are 3 things you could do that make a difference: run, hide, fight. First and foremost, if you can get out, do. Always try and escape or evacuate, even when others insist on staying. Encourage others to leave with you, but don't let them slow you down with indecision. Remember what's important, you, not your stuff. Leave your belongings behind and try to find a way to get out safely. Trying to get yourself out of harm's way needs to be your #1 priority.
No, stop that guy! Hey!
Once you are out of the line of fire, try to prevent others from walking into the danger zone and call 911.
Yes, we're to Washington. Help us!
If you can't get out safely, you need to find a place to hide. Act quickly and quietly. Try to secure your hiding place the best you can. Turn out lights, and if possible, remember to lock doors. Silence your ringer and vibration mode on your cell phone. And if you can't find a safe room or closet, try to conceal yourself behind large objects that may protect you. Do your best to remain quiet and calm. As a last resort, if your life is at risk, whether you are alone or working together as a group, fight. Act with aggression. Improvise weapons. Disarm him. And commit to taking the shooter down, no matter what. Try to be aware of your environment. Always have an exit plan. Know that in an incident like this, victims are generally chosen randomly. The event is unpredictable and may evolve quickly.
Get left, slice and get my back.
The first responders on the scene are not there to evacuate or tend to the injured. They are well trained and are there to stop the shooter.
Shot down the hall. I got rear.
Your actions can make a difference for your safety and survival. Be aware and be prepared. And if you find yourself facing an active shooter, there are 3 key things you need to remember to survive. Run, hide, fight.
The Run, Hide, Fight video, we are a big fan of here at Radnor Township. This is being shown across the country, and the great thing is there's a ton of information in it, but it encapsulates an incident and the options of run, hide, fight that those people used to attempt to stay alive and get away from the active shooter. The nice thing about that video is you can type it in YouTube, just type in run, hide, fight. You'll see it come up. You can show it to your family members, tell friends about it, and we hope that you'll watch it again just to review the scenarios that went over. To keep the evening short, though, it's based on 3 principles. The run, because obviously if you can get away from the active shooter, and it's not just a shooter. We had a situation in upper Allentown area where a student got into a school with 2 knives and inflicted a lot of bodily harm. So it's creating mass problems or mass injuries, and what we want to do is if you can run and escape it, get away from it, it's clearly that simple. You're now away from it. Hide is very important. Hiding can be very hard. Where can we hide right now? There you go, perfect. We could hide behind there. We could go into one of the other rooms, or at least attempt to find shelter under chairs or pull some things together. Open some cabinet doors. There are some limitations, but we can flip some of those tables in the corners over. It's very important to think about the hide. In the Virginia Tech shooting, one of the things they did learn is some of the people in the upper classrooms all got into one area and got stuck. And a lot of those injuries or deaths were sustained being sort of like sheep all stuck in one corner with no plan. Trying to take any opportunity you can to, at the minimum, hide, if you have no other opportunities, will take you out of sight of the active shooter or person trying to do harm and will really pay off. And the last opportunity, and it is very important to stress this, is fight. And as you saw in the video, it said imminent danger. You have no other options. You need to get a resolve to yourself, which I know you can do, and know that you could fight through it. Come up with a game plan. Communicate with your fellow people who are in the room. Find items that you could use to fend off somebody. So let's use this room again. What could we use to fend off an attacker here? Okay, we have chairs. Computer screens, excellent. How about the flags? You could use the flags. Ladies, can anybody lift up their bag? I bet you some of those have some items in there we could do some damage with. All right, but in them, or guys, what do we have potentially? Keys are becoming less and less, but how about a set of keys in your hand? Okay, how about hot coffee? All right, even water to distract. There is a fire extinguisher in the corner. They use that. Could you deploy it and stay away from them so they can't see, or possibly hit them with it, or deploy it and then hit them with it? So there's several things in there. With our purses or belts, could we secure the two doors there by putting something thin through those two doors and secure the doors even though they don't have locks, which would potentially give people more time to hide in the room? So the run, hide, fight, and we could talk about this for hours, is very important. Leave your belongings behind, especially if you're in a business or your home. It's very commonplace. We see it time and time again, people trying to grab their stuff. It's an automatic reaction. If you have the chance to get away, don't hesitate. Your phone, your purse, whatever, can always be replaced. But if you're injured permanently, that's just simply said you can't be. Help others escape. Give people direction. If they look confused, say you're in this township building and I know where I'm going, I say that's the hallway to get out. That's all you have to do, and keep them moving. Prevent others from entering the area. We saw the guy pulling on a bike. He's got his earphones on. We don't want to let people go back into the area and have more of a problem. Hide. I did talk about this. There's a great picture of them barricading a door. That door probably doesn't lock. It's a double door like ours, but what they did is took every opportunity to keep the active shooter who wants to hurt people. So if there's a big obstacle or a solid steel door that's locked, they're going to go on to something easy. They want easy targets, unfortunately. Blockade the door. Pile all these chairs up against the door. Silence your cell phone and remain very quiet. Again, as a last resort, no other choices. We don't want you engaging people with weapons. Many of these people, to the presentation, have mental health issues or are radicalists, so they're willing to die, and that's what you need to understand. But if you have no other choice, then get a team plan together and fight through it. Attempt to incapacitate the shooter. If you get them down on the ground, at least try and get the weapon away from them. Hold them down, or if you can get the weapon and you can run, then do that. And you have to commit to your actions. Just like the fellow Americans on Flight 93, they committed to those actions and they stopped probably a lot more destruction, whatever that last plane was going to do. And everybody knows that story, but they committed to an action and they made a difference. 911, kind of important. Everybody's like, I know how to call 911. It's more than calling 911. We need you to be calm, state what was going on, give a location of victims, description of the shooter, number of shooters if there are more than one, and physical description of shooters, type of weapons. And I can tell you that the dispatchers are going to ask you questions that may not make sense and you're going to be upset. Please stay on the line with them. They're trained to get information out from you. And your knowledge of a building, if you work in a school, an office building, is huge, because if we haven't been there before and you're like, I'm on the 3rd floor by the big fish tank, that really will help officers who are under stressful situation trying to get up as quick as they can to you. Going down one wrong hallway in a commercial building can really waste some valuable time. So it's very important. We did have some drills with the school district, and in one of the drills in the school district, an active shooter drill, we were able to find the active shooter extremely quickly because they actually called 911. We did it one time and it filled up the 911 board, but we had a very different outcome because of very clear information collected by the school staff that was there, and that was not predetermined. Everything that happened was by accident where the active shooter role player went. When the police arrived, you saw that at the end. You saw that mission that the police officers had, those initial officers. They have a mission, and they're going to look for the active shooter. You need to remain calm, follow officers' instructions, avoid screaming or pointing. Raise your hands, because why do you want to raise your hands? You don't want the police to confuse you with somebody else. These officers are going to be keyed up, and they have a very particular mission, and their training is very clear to look for that active shooter and neutralize them. Avoid making quick movement towards officers, such as attempting to hold on to them for safety. They have their weapons ready. They are trying to take action. We don't want to hold on to them. Do not stop to ask officers for help or direction when evacuating. Just proceed in the direction from which officers are entering the premise. I do want to clarify that. If you were in a room and you weren't sure what to do, call 911. Try and save your phone. I know people are going to be calling you, seeing what's going on. Keep your phone ready. Call 911. Say, should I leave? Should I stay? It is okay to use 911 for that. They may tell you to get off the line because they're overwhelmed, but they're also going to say stay put. So 911 can be your friend. So in other words, if you don't know what to do, you can use your phone to get 911 information, and then you may stay put. Often these incidents go on where we're clearing a building. That can take over an hour in some commercial properties, sometimes up to 2, where we sweep it 2 times to make sure there's no victims, people just hiding, or any other bad guys or secondary events. So it is very important to use 911 appropriately. Chief, you want to do questions? Next part is going to be our questions. We're going to ask our speakers to come up, and we're at the ready to answer any questions for you. Officer Janoski, can you come up, please? What's that? Hey, you can work the crowd there. We are going to be passing out 2 handouts. You're not going to leave empty-handed. We're going to let you have some of these wallet card holders, which go over some of the safety tips. You pass them out while you go around it, and then Officer Metzer, would you pass those around too? And also a handout that has other information where you can study online to find out more about this presentation that we did and other information or key points about it.
So we'd like to open up to the floor now for questions. If you have a question, just raise your hand. Officer Janoski will come over with the microphone. Officer Janoski, we have a gentleman over here in the red shirt.
On your lap.
Thanks for doing this. 2 questions. One is, when I was in D.C. about 15 years ago, we had almost every month a bomb threat called in to one of the big buildings. Part of this was a result of the Persian Gulf conflict. Do we have bomb-sniffing dogs available to us? And has that ever come up in Radnor?
Yes, we do. The answer to your question is yes. Right here in Radnor Township, we have 2 canine officers with Bear and Rocky, and they are bomb dogs. So
Thank you. Second question, real quick, is I know the city has used cameras a lot lately and has invested in having cameras at various buildings, and that seems to have a deterrent effect a little bit in some places. How is Radnor equipped vis-a-vis something like that? I would expect that the large venues might have cameras like Villanova, the football stadium, and so forth.
So on a daily event, detectives and police officers canvass the area for live video footage, and you'll see it many times on the news of simple robberies, thefts, other items like that. So that's a normal part of our police procedure. The Radnor Township does not specifically own any camera systems with the exception of our buildings that we own. However, there are initiatives from the federal and state, but I can speak specifically to Delaware County, are working on integrating and keeping a listing through our communications center of these cameras and also working on live feed information. And there are sharing information centers, such in Philadelphia, the Divic Center, which actually ties in multiple private and public sector video footage, and they monitor it live. So there's also what we call a fusion center that's working on that. So we are involved in it to the level that we can be, and we stay a part of those associations that have that info.
1 minute, sorry. They'll be up with the microphone momentarily. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, a couple of questions. Should you teach children about this? How old should they be before you would start teaching about this? And what would be the best way to teach them?
We recommend that you start teaching them as early as possible. It's no different than when we were growing up that you had the fire drills in school. So from the time you went into, kindergarten, nursery school, whatever it might be, that's where we were basically indoctrinated into the fire drills. Same situation here. The schools are handled a little bit differently. We saw the run, hide, fight video here. A lot of times the schools are shelter in place just because of sheer numbers. We have a different response to that. But that's something you should start right away. And all these resources are available on the internet, as Lieutenant Flanagan says, that you can start the education process at a very young age. That's why it's ingrained. It's ingrained as we grow up. And we basically try to tell our businesses, you have fire drills, start having, intruder drills or active shooter drills. We do it here at the Township building. They will announce that there's an intruder in here, and it's a drill, and then everybody in the building has to go into a lockdown mode. It's something we practice, and we're practicing basically what we're preaching to the general public. It's important to have that.
I live in a neighboring township, and you have done a beautiful job. You're very, very well prepared here. And I want to know how well other townships around here, are they prepared nearly as well as you people are?
I'd like to say that Radnor is the best police department in Delaware County, and I think we can prove that. No offense to our neighboring towns, but I think we have the most highly trained police officers probably in the tri-state area. And the township manager, Mr. Zinkowski, raised the hiring standards, and you could ask any one of our officers that were hired in the last 5 years. It's easier to become a Navy SEAL than it is to become a Radnor police officer. Trust me, and I mean that.
Regarding 911, roughly, what is the average time from when you call 911 to when you get the response? And do you actually, if you're in a situation where you can't make noise, if you just call 911 and leave the phone in that active mode, can you track it from that?
So the 911 center in Delaware County, and we just recently participated in a presentation here a week ago. They are actually they're investigating text capabilities. All the 911 centers in the region are looking at the ability to receive text. It is not available right at this time, but it is coming in the near future where you would be able to text in a message. The departments or communication centers that have that, it's a limited amount that have text come in, people are still able to use voice. However, if you have a landline, in other words, something that's attached to a building, that gives what they call alley information or CAD information, which brings up the address and a general location, if not a specific location, of where you are at. One of the problems with cell phones are, especially on a community like this that borders Chester County and Montgomery County, you could get bumped to a 911 center by your cell phone hitting another tower. So you want to make sure that you know where you're going. So even if you go to a hotel or somewhere and you have a simple medical emergency or a situation that we just reviewed, you want to have a general idea of what county and what the address is so that you can give them that and they'll move you to the proper location. And our response times are usually within 2 to 3 minutes of a serious incident having a car on location.
One other thing, too, like Lieutenant Flanagan brought up at that last presentation, any 911 hang-up call, or like the gentleman said, leaving the phone off the hook, they absolutely will send the police.
Thank you. Last week, we were at the meeting, and the 911 gentleman was saying that if when they answer 911, they don't say fire, emergency, and police, that you're in another county. So would you still, in this kind of situation, just go for it and tell whoever picks up? Or would you want to be in Delaware County, or does it matter?
If an incident such as an intruder or an active shooter is occurring, all the 911 centers in the area are going to be inundated with calls. So if you can't talk, you open that up, all right, they're going to listen. They're going to take that information and they're going to pass that along to law enforcement that's responding or the commanders that are on scene. So all the information, the intelligence we can get helps to locate that individual in the building. So if you can't talk, leave it open. All right, and there's other ways that we can go with our detectives where they can start doing, they can ping phones, they can start doing some triangulation for locations as well. But it's important, the more intelligence we get, the quicker we can respond and mitigate the problem and neutralize the shooter.
But don't hang up. If you were to call and they say Montgomery County Fire and Ambulance, I'm not sure what they say, you want to tell them where you're at and what's going on. They're either going to transfer you or assist Delaware County Communications in working it out. We don't want you to take the chance of getting dropped or losing a cell signal or wasting 30 seconds redialing. So,
for the simulation, what would you do if none of us replied to the shooter? Would you ignore his questions, or we all sat still? What would it'll?
Carol, that was before the training. Now, I know if that happened now, everybody would be basically fleeing the room, getting out, okay, or hiding in that situation. You can try to, at that situation, if he's not shooting, at that point, it may be becoming a barricade situation, so talking helps, okay? And that's what the police, as I stated earlier, with a barricade situation, we try to establish a rapport with the individual, find out what the issue is, what the needs are, and to come to a successful resolution. You could do that. But obviously, if it starts as an active shooter situation, you want to vacate that area as quickly as possible. But if it comes down to, negotiating with them, that's not a bad thing either. But just remember, you don't want to promise something that you can't come through on, and that's what our investigators and our negotiators are trained in.
I have a question. Most of what we've heard tonight is about response to a shooting. I mean, what's available for prevention? To try to curtail the actual event from happening. I mean, it seems like we're treating symptoms, not sources.
I think it's based on what people see and what we talked about this evening. All right, your gut reaction is important. If you say something's not right here, that makes all the difference in the world to make that phone call. That's what it comes down to. Timothy McVeigh, I'll use that from the Oklahoma City bombing. He was stopped by a police officer because there was a taillight out on the car, and then that obviously culminated into the arrest, of him for the bombing itself. But it's the small things. It's not the large egregious things. You see something that's not right, that's where we need to start making the 911 call. Or that we know somebody that may be living in our neighborhood, that something's not right there, let me call the police, let me pass that information along so it can be properly vetted through our detective bureau and be investigated and go from there. A lot of times people may say, oh, you know what, I heard about that, and sadly an incident occurs, and they say maybe I should have made the phone call prior to this happening. So that's the thing, is prevention and awareness. And as I stated earlier when we started this evening, I think people have a different perspective when they're walking into a public venue now, that they're going to look around and say, if something happens, where are my escape routes? Where are my emergency exits? If I'm pinned into a room, what can I use to defend myself? So that's all part of what we're trying to promote and get out to the public this evening.
I guess what I'm suggesting is, how is it that we can vet, without getting into a totalitarian state, a violent situation like what we're talking about? In other words, head it off before it even gets started.
Well, although there's some bigger issues that I think the government's looking at, and we hear many of the stories about whether it's how people are purchasing weapons, other things. But I can tell you from a local police department standard, which this event is the focus of, would be that we take extremely serious mental health emergencies. We're extremely diligent with that. We do a lot more follow-up than 10 years ago. Domestic violence situations we are very involved in, and now we have more, the school districts and places of business are calling us a lot more frequently to do, to Lieutenant Block's point, a threat assessment. So on our local level, we are heading on these problems by being aggressive, investigating them, doing a threat assessment, and if somebody needs assistance before they go to the critical state, we're getting them to some type of hospital, mental health facility, or EAP at their workplace.
history of mental problems. But you know, somebody could be perfectly normal, buy it, and then have them start sliding into a mental breakdown, maybe a couple of years later, and then you know he's armed. He's already got his.
Right, that's a valid point, and that's somebody else is going to know about this. There's usually a family member that knows that they've purchased the farm, whatever it might be, and if they start seeing the differences in behavior, that's really that we should be notified on it, and we can deal with our crisis intervention teams in Delaware County to assess this, and also through our law enforcement partners and our detective bureau. The other thing at Radnor Township is very proactive in is the Citizens Police Academy, and that's another aspect of it. And we have several of our graduates that are here this evening in the audience that they come through an 8-week program, and again, they receive, specialized training on what the police department does, and that's passed along for, the awareness in the community. And then they also come back and serve the township in many different fashions, such as become members of our Town Watch program, or they're also assisting the police department in other aspects. So this township is very, very proactive, as you can see this evening through the public safety forums, as well as engaging our residents, and they're helping us out. It's a collaboration as we're all in this together as one community.
There was a shooting in a movie theater in the Northwest someplace, in an area where there were 12 large movie theaters. The reason this particular shooter chose that particular theater was it was the only theater that did not have a guns allowed policy. And what I'm seeing here is this soft target is something that perhaps the citizens could address by coming to these events armed. Do I need to buy a gun to take my wife to the movies?
That's a personal decision that you would have to make, and obviously everybody has the constitutional right, if they go through the legal process to purchase a firearm. And again, that's it. The one thing we remind everybody is, and even our police officers, every time we go on a call, there's at least one firearm there, and that's the police officers. And whose firearm is it? It's whoever controls it. So you may make that decision to purchase one and have it. If you're overpowered and they take that firearm, chances are they're going to use it against you. So that's what we want people to be aware of. But it's a personal decision that, that you would make to do that. Doctor.
And are you aware of any, going along with that gentleman's question, are you aware of any situations where an armed civilian actually took down an active shooter? We hear so much about so many people being armed and so many weapons in the community. Do we know of situations where a civilian took somebody down?
There was the most recent situation in Delaware County. The active shooter was at Fitzgerald Mercy Hospital, and the physician was carrying. Sadly, the individual came in and they shot and killed the receptionist, and then the doctor engaged the individual. So that's a situation there that may have prevented more carnage. Yes, but again, remember, with the firearm being out there, and law enforcement's coming. Once we arrive, we don't know who you are. If you have a firearm, they have one objective there at that point if it's an active shooter situation. So there are multiple variables that you have to take into consideration and make that decision, that personal decision on whether or not you want to carry a firearm and have the concealed firearms license to do so.
And to answer the point of the firearm, I think what we're trying to display here is it's not just one component to stop active shooters. It is a whole approach. And weapons themselves are not necessarily the counterman to the active shooter. It's mental health system, our preparation, our awareness, our teamwork as a community, training of police officers, training of citizens. I could keep going on and on. Just like fires and fire deaths in this country are down from 100 years ago, where they had significant death and significant damage. Through education, codes, and other things, we have been able to take on a very serious threat. And I think this country is becoming aware, like we did, of fire, and we're moving to that. But I can say that one particular item, such as a weapon, won't countermand all of the situations. If you do get a gun, we do ask you to follow the laws of the federal government, the state, and the county and township that you're in, and also train yourself properly if that is a personal choice you make.
I teach an HR course that emphasizes disaster response plans. that each company has each year that they review and update. And that's not done in many companies today. This is a very important adjunct, very important part of that whole program, that every company, whether it's a man-made or a natural disaster, whatever it might be. But my question is more specific. A year ago, the Today Show showed a school in the United States that had two things to ward off intruders. One was when an intruder was found, it triggered an alarm that caused smoke to come from shin high up to the ceiling, and completely, he or she would have to get on their hands and knees to crawl in that hallway. Very interesting concept. And then there was an automatic trigger to the police department who could view it on cameras. Now, I don't know about our schools. Are we, I realize that's an expensive alternative. Are we anywhere close to something like that?
Delaware County, and it was an initiative through the district attorney's office and the Delaware County Council, they have Del Pass. It's in every school in Delaware County. So if there's an emergency, an intruder in there, they hit that. It's a panic button. Some of the schools have multiple locations, and that establishes a direct communication line with the 911 center. So the information is real time that's coming through that. It's given to the law enforcement officers that are responding. So that's what we have right now. As Lieutenant Flanagan stated earlier, that these mesh systems with cameras is still evolving. If there are cameras that we can link into, that's something that would be handled through the fusion centers and whatnot. And there's all different types of devices that are out there, you know, as far as the prevention and deterring and whatnot. So it's an ongoing, evolving process that we deal with.
In that scenario you ran, is it my understanding the shots were fired behind me, but did he come in and say he killed somebody? Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
So in that situation, it's a propensity for violence. Even though he's in here at this point, he's not shooting. He's already displayed the actual effect of what has happened. All right, he has the means, the motive, and the opportunity. He already used that. So when these officers come in here, at that point, they are justified in using deadly force to neutralize him because of his previous actions already.
My question has to do with see something, say something. When there's someone in your neighborhood that doesn't seem quite right, but hasn't ever done anything specific, how do you know when you should call, number one? And number two, what can you do if nothing has occurred?
Could I answer this, if you gentlemen don't mind? Because the township manager and I have gone to so many community meetings and town hall meetings, and I can't tell you how many times people have told the township manager, well, you know, I saw this car that I never saw before. I saw this fella in the neighborhood, and he didn't look like one of my neighbors, but I didn't want to bother the police, or I didn't want to be accused of profiling, so I chose not to call 911. Absolutely, always call 911 and let us worry about it. Like was brought out at our seminar a couple weeks ago, you don't have to give your name, it could be anonymous, but if something doesn't feel right, don't worry about somebody accusing you of being biased or, you know, whatever the case may be. Call us. 911 is how everything gets started, so don't ever hesitate. You're not bothering us. That's what you pay taxes for.
Thank you again for having this program tonight and others like it during the course of this summer and hopefully in the fall too. My question goes to keeping yourself safe and your loved ones or coworkers if you happen to be in a situation. And one of the points that I think surprised me was reminding how quickly you seem to suggest these things take place. Less than 10 minutes, you said an average, I thought of about 4 minutes, which really is a game changer. I hadn't really thought of it from that perspective, maybe others haven't either. But you don't have time to go waste. You've got to act right then and there when you see that situation. Can you confirm that really most of these types of situations happen that quickly? Is that the way you have to really deal with it and think of it?
Yes, and that's based on the after-action reports, from the time the call came in till the time that the shooting stopped. On the average, it's about 4 minutes and 32 seconds. It adjusts. The other thing is you realize when Detective Metzler came in here after the shooting occurred in the lobby, he's running around the room here. How long did it seem to you? What was that? A half hour. Actually, we timed it. It was a minute and a half. We said to come in. But it does. Minutes seem like hours when it's a critical situation. And there's biological changes, physiological changes that are going on within your body. You don't even realize that. But guess what? Your pulse rate's up. All right, your blood vessels are starting to dilate and whatnot because there's a fight or flight syndrome that's occurring within your body. And that's a good thing, you know, that it's an awareness. But that's how quickly it can change. But like I said, minutes seem hours. And we've been on that too. We can't get there quick enough, but we have to get there in a safe manner. And the other day, you know, we were dispatched to go down to Fallcroft where the officer was shot. And, you know, we had a fair distance to travel. You know, you got to do it in a safe manner, but you just never seem to get there quickly enough.
And just review that plan. So go home tonight, let them know about that video, and remember, run, hide, fight. Because I know that everybody has the ability to run, hide, and fight for 4 minutes or up to 10 minutes to help survive a situation. Let us get there and do what we're good at, and guarantee you that we will have much better survival rates in the community when you go over that plan.
We want to thank everyone for coming out this evening, and we're going to turn the podium over to Superintendent Colarillo and our Township Manager, Mr. Robert Zinkowski.
Just two quick things. I want to tell you how proud I am of my people, and I think this was invaluable, and the Township Manager plans to give this even more frequently. And again, I want to thank Mr. Zinkowski because he gives us the ability to give these kind of timely seminars. So without further ado, this is our Township Manager. And I'd like to acknowledge one gentleman that answered the question is the President of the Board of Commissioners. That's Philip R. So he thought enough to come here for that. So this is Mr. Zinkowski.
Again, thank you all for coming tonight. It's interesting to hear all about this. It's real. I wish there was a way in which we could prevent this and prevent all the crazies and the bad guys from doing these types of things. But it's our world today, and it's how well we prepare for this. I agree with what the superintendent said. Our police department is so well trained, and this is going on my 25th year of being in this role. This is the third city I've managed. This is the best police force I've ever been involved with. These guys and ladies are top notch, and I'll put my life in their hands every day without hesitation at all. And I want them responding to every call, and we give them the best tools. Thanks to the Board of Commissioners, we'll give them the best tools. Unfortunately, we're always outgunned, but we try to give them the best tools that we can to be prepared for this. One thing I know is mentioned about calling 911, never hesitate to call, because there are things you're going to notice that just don't seem right. And there are things in Radnor where we had someone that put a ladder up on their neighbor's house at 2 in the morning, climbed up there, taking the light bulb out. Neighbor saw it and said, went back to bed and somebody burglarized the house. Well, that's not right. I don't think so, so call. I know about 10 years ago, I noticed, older men in their late 20s, early 30s skateboarding down my street, thinking, oh, that seems odd. But did I do anything? No. The next night, they robbed 38 homes in my development, my home being one. So it's one of those things where, guess what? If something doesn't look right, feel right, seem right, you call always. Over and over, like the superintendent said, call us, have us respond. Let us be the ones that say, oh, it's all clear, because you just never know. And we get residents that call that says someone's walking down the street, I don't know them, I don't recognize them, or there's a van parked out in front of my neighbor's house that's been here at 7 o'clock in the morning. They haven't gotten out of the vehicle all day. Call. It doesn't matter. Let us be the ones to determine that. Be safe. Worry about yourselves, your family, your neighbors and friends. Take care of that first. Call 911. Same thing with gas. We had where we get gas smells and gas odors in neighborhoods. We find out 8 days later that neighbors have been talking amongst themselves for 8 days that there's this horrible smell of natural gas, and well, we've been calling PICO. We get this call, we go out there, it's like, oh my God, this is awful. We get fire and police out, we're getting PICO out, and all of a sudden we get them in the ground doing something. Call 911 and say, it smells of natural gas. Let us get PICO out, because we can get PICO out like within hours instead of 8 days go by and they haven't responded. Call us for whatever that is. That's what we're here for. So again, thank you for coming tonight. We appreciate all your time for coming here, and Thanks to all these folks for putting it together.
Please feel free, the officers will remain here. If you have individual questions, please stop up and see them. And again, we appreciate all your support in coming out this evening. Thank you.